What is poppin' YouTube? Bringing you 5 future Dynasty stars, and I have a guest today. He's a baller, but not just any type of baller. He's a fantasy footballer, the greatest fantasy show on the planet. Not only does he bring everything great fantasy and Dynasty fantasy football, he's a killer dad and pickleballer. This is a huge moment for the channel. Welcome to the show, Andy Holloway.
My pickleball prowess, it's becoming more and more important as part of my life the older I get. So thank you.
Of course, of course. Well, like I said, guys, we're talking through some Dynasty stars. So, Andy, I know you guys started off in fantasy football, but you guys are really great at Dynasty fantasy football. So, if you haven't checked out their Dynasty channel yet, that is linked below. Their fantasy channel is linked below. But, Andy, tell me who your first rising star is for Dynasty.
Well, I'm going to take the kind of like put the ball on the tee and take a low-hanging fruit situation here. But it'd be a bad show if we didn't talk about Drake London and all of the attention that Drake London's getting in Atlanta. Finally has a quarterback, has an opportunity to see significantly more volume. I think if you compare him with what we've seen from Garrett Wilson, he's probably about 100 targets underneath where Garrett Wilson's been the last couple of years, and it's just been because of the dynamics of that Arthur Smith offense. Atlanta's going to line up in 3 wide receiver sets a lot more this year. Kirk Cousins is looking for his Justin Jefferson in that offense. So I think all of the disappointment associated with Drake London, like we know when we watch him on film how great he is and what the potential is, but you couldn't count on him. There wasn't a dependency that you could have on London in fantasy. So for me, I know that the managers of Drake London are probably not eager to let him go, but I am fully in on the future of Drake London with Kirk Cousins, at least for the next 2 or 3 years.
Nah, I absolutely love that pick. I've been a big Jersey Drake believer myself, and the Kirk Cousins ad was definitely a great ad. My first guy that I'll be talking about is Raachad White. 15.8 points per game here in 2023. He was the RB10 on a points per game basis. Really RB4 on snap share, RB7 in opportunity share, RB2 in carry. So all the metrics that you'd want in a running back were there for Raachad White. Really the biggest thing, the Tampa Bay offensive line, depending on what site you look at, whether it's PFF, whether it's Player Profiler, somewhere around the 17th to 20th ranked offensive line, which really caused that 3.6 yards per carry. So really, I think if the offensive line can get improved, all wheels are up for Raachad White, who had a ton of receptions. Really, the receptions in PPR is what kept Raachad White afloat. RB13 on keep trade cut. So right now in Dynasty, it's a really great value. You can get him as a lot of people are looking at him as maybe a back-end RB1, high-end RB2, and I think he has the potential to get into that top 5 range for us in fantasy football, but for Dynasty fantasy football purposes, getting into the top 8, top 7 Dynasty running back.
I think some people are put off by the yards per carry number, but I agree with you actually on this take. I think his versatility is what gives him that value, and their stability with the quarterback position, so probably undervalued in a Dynasty format.
Who's your next rising star?
Well, it's funny because I put a few names together before we hopped on, and then we get this breaking news about the Stephon Diggs trade, which Tank Dell was going to be one of the names that I was going to mention. So I'm going to pivot that to another name I wrote down that is going to benefit from the trade that just took place with Stephon Diggs leaving the wide receiver room in Buffalo. I'm going to go with Dalton Kincaid. I think as a Dynasty star, we saw the potential weeks 7 through 11. He was the tight end 3 in that span. He was averaging almost 12 fantasy points per game. You saw the targets go up. You saw a small window of elite tight end production, and there's tons of opportunity in Buffalo now. Josh Allen and that offense is not going to be only a run-first offense. This is going to be, no Gabe Davis, no Stephon Diggs. We have, Curtis Samuel's a piece of the puzzle now, probably a rookie, but Dalton Kincaid is coming into year 2. Opportunity for a young tight end to actually emerge. And, he's one of the few, I think there's been about 10 rookie tight ends averaging more than 9 PPR points per game. So he is a guy that can do it. And I think Dalton Kincaid takes a huge step up. Because we didn't see it for a huge span, some players may be nervous, especially with all the anticipation they had for Kyle Pitts over the last couple of years. But I think Kincaid is somebody that's going to have a really rock-solid floor with a high ceiling.
Absolutely love that take. I actually had Nico Collins in a buy low video that was going to be dropped later today. Had to go back in, cut that take out because no longer buy low. Nico Collins, clear wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, depending on if you like Tank Dell. So good trade there for Houston Texans and CJ Stroud. I'm an Ohio State Buckeye fan, so always good to see CJ Stroud. But on that same wavelength, I have JSN as a rising star in Dynasty, and no one likes to take these quote-unquote face planner wide receivers in Dynasty. We've kind of been blessed over the last few years to see guys come right in off the jump, be absolutely fantasy football darling stars in their rookie seasons. But what were we really expecting with JSN being drafted in the top 20 picks to the Seattle Seahawks, being behind DK Metcalf, being behind Tyler Lockett, who honestly, Tyler Lockett, very undervalued wide receiver, not only for fantasy football purposes, but for dynasty fantasy football purposes over the last few years. It was just a really unique situation. So heading into year 2, we have not only a whole new coaching staff, but I think JSN takes that step. He was injured coming into last year, did break that hand, so started off to a pretty slow start. So I'm not blaming him being behind Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf purely on JSN's talent level. I think year 2 is going to be a pretty big year for him. Now, the 17% target share, that is pretty alarming for a guy that was playing almost 95% of his snaps in the slot. His 8.8 fantasy points per game, that's not the best. It was wide receiver 8 among rookies. So there's a lot of concern, but wide receiver 25 on Keep Track Out right now, right around Zay Flowers, DK Metcalf, and Pickens. I think JSN, definitely if you want to take that upside shot, I think he's the next dynasty star that we're going to be targeting.
Yeah, and I think it will happen. I mean, I'm not 100% positive it'll be this year, but people do forget that he had a hand injury for the first, I think, 5 weeks of last year. So your opportunity to acclimate, to make your mark, to prove to demand the target share, it was going to be challenged by the injury. So I think that's a good name to be paying attention to, even if it's an investment that pays out a little bit more in a couple of years.
100%. Who is your next rising star, Andy?
Yeah, well, I will, without knowing more about the legal situation, I'm going to just bypass it in the moment. But Rashee Rice of the Kansas City Chiefs, we saw the potential over the back half of the year from week 12 on. He was wide receiver 9, I believe, 9 targets a game, seemed like the only reliable go-to receiver that Patrick Mahomes had on a weekly basis. And, finally a player that we can look at and say, look, we're not just going to project Tyreek Hill onto the next, MVS and McCole Hardman and Sky Moore. And look, I think it's natural for the psychology of fantasy to be discouraged and no longer appropriate upside to the wide receiver position in Kansas City. However, we need to be kind of like looking at these things one by one, case by case. And Rashee Rice is a dynamic player after the catch, whose route tree is going to evolve over the next couple of years. I'm not sure that Hollywood Brown is going to be the deterrence to his breakout that some people might imagine. We've watched Hollywood Brown here in Arizona for a couple of years, very injury prone, seems to have struggled the last couple of years. He was with his best friend, Kyler Murray in Arizona, still couldn't get it dialed in over the back half of last year. And maybe is more of a one-trick pony down the field than people might imagine. So I think Rashee Rice is somebody that if the legal situation and the Hollywood Brown situation is driving down the value, you take the gamble. I mean, we don't know what's going to come out of the legal side, but that's kind of what you have to do in Dynasty is take some measured risk. And I think Rashee Rice has that potential to be a tried and true, reliable option in Dynasty.
Well, I like that pick, and I take all of my legal fantasy football advice from all of those, we like to call them Twitter lawyers, and they're saying, max 8 games is what it's sounding like worst case scenario, which if that's the worst case scenario, 8 games, you get Rice at a little bit of a discount. Plus, he has all the upside in the world in this Kansas City Chiefs offense. Absolutely love it. My next rising star, and I don't know if this is technically like a rising star because a lot of people have had him hyped and had the potential, but T. Higgins, wide receiver 21, right now on Keep Trade Cut, 11.5 points per game, wide receiver 40 on the points per game basis this last year. So he's still only 25 years old, so still has the age cliff on his side. Really, for me, the thing that's exciting for T. Higgins in 2023, Higgins set a new career high in ADOT, so average depth of target, yards per catch, and touchdown rate, all with Joe Burrow pretty much being on the IR most of the season. So while T. Higgins is the clear wide receiver 2 on this team, he did get tagged, so we don't know where his long-term outlook is going to look for the Cincinnati Bengals. I am really excited to see what is going to happen with T. Higgins if he's in the Cincinnati Bengals offense, but we do have the NFL draft happening right around the corner. The Buffalo Bills just traded away their alpha wide receiver and are in desperate need of some wide receiver help. So we'll have to see if they end up going with a rookie wide receiver, if someone like a T. Higgins could be the answer on a team like that, whether the Carolina Panthers, who have had interest in T. Higgins before, kind of come in the draft. So I think there's a lot of good opportunities where even worst case scenario, T. Higgins is the wide receiver 2 playing alongside Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow. That's great. Maybe better case scenario, he goes to be an alpha somewhere else. I really like T. Higgins. I think right now his value is appropriately valued, where take that shot on a guy that we have, has the frame and has the skill set to be an elite level dynasty star.
Yeah, you just want him to stay healthy, and then ultimately, he's going to get paid, right? I didn't expect Pittman to get the kind of money he got this offseason. Higgins, I look at, he's in the shadow of Jamar Chase. It probably won't be that case for very long, and he will get paid. So you always want to follow the money in the long-term deal, and assuming he gets that, in a new destination, he has the physical skill set to deliver. So I definitely don't mind that.
And we said 5, but Andy, give us an extra, give us a tidbit, an extra dynasty star that you see heading into 2024.
Interesting. Yeah. I like I said, the Tank Dell situation is so funny because, I wonder if there will be some maybe delusion on behalf of dynasty players. I'm going to stick with him. I'm going to stick with Tank Dell because I'm going to tell dynasty fantasy players to look through the mist, look through the wide receiver 2s and 3s that they're going to have this year when it's Diggs and Collins. And you mentioned Collins, up and coming star. What do you believe about Stephon Diggs is going to be the question you have to ask yourself when you are looking at the future. In Dynasty, we're looking beyond a 1-year window. If Diggs' second half last year is an indication of where his trajectory is going, and this isn't the same player that has existed in previous years, you're going to have a problem in Houston over time. You're either going to have an underperforming Stephon Diggs, or if you do have that, you're going to have an angry Stephon Diggs. He's been an angry Stephon Diggs based on targets and attention in a lot of in Minnesota, in Buffalo. And if he's not getting that kind of target share in Houston, it might be a short-lived project. I mean, Buffalo took a lot of the financial risk with Stephon Diggs. Houston's taking the shot on bringing him in, and Tank Dell's coming off of an injury. So I think, you talked about JSN, right? Like this year, they restructured Tyler Lockett, and DK Metcalf is still there. So there's a reason why people might be off of JSN. I think that same thing might happen with Tank Dell, but you have to be courageous. You have to be willing to look through 1 year, beyond a 1-year lens. And this isn't a player that just kind of muddled in wide receiver 2 range for a couple of weeks. This was a player who was wide receiver 3 for a 4-week span. He showed upside to the tune of 20.5 fantasy points per game during that stretch and was a go-to receiver for CJ Stroud. And the future of Houston, it's the youth. It's not Stephon Diggs aging and becoming their go-to guy for 5 years. I think he is a 1-year rental, kind of looking like maybe even the DeAndre Hopkins to Tennessee situation from last year, or a final year in Arizona DeAndre Hopkins. This is not Stephon Diggs coming into Buffalo. So I'll stick with the name I had written down. I'll just tell people to have the intestinal fortitude to look beyond a 1-year window. And I still think that there's a chance that the hierarchy there, halfway through the year, you're looking at Tank Dell through a different lens, and maybe he's a discount.
No, I absolutely love it. And if you look at Twitter, there's been the debates before this trade happened between Nico Collins versus Tank Dell, how they both are going to hurt each other. Well, if you actually look into the metrics, both of them absolutely kill when they're against man coverage. You add Stephon Diggs into the fold. Who are you doubling out of those wide receivers? You doubling Tank Dell, you doubling Stephon Diggs, you doubling Nico Collins. No, you're leaving all of them out on their own island. So now, granted, they're not going to maybe have the overall upside that you were expecting, but I still think Tank Dell is maybe the sneakiest wide receiver 1 potential candidate out of that wide receiver room. So
yeah, big play guy,
take.
Big play.
Yeah. Big play guy, 100%. Well, thank you so much for that, Andy. We're going to transition. So we got a lot of younger content creators that tune into the channel. So wanted to kind of talk and ask some content creation questions from you. So my first question to you, Andy, is what do you think makes a good content creator?
I would say passion, which sounds super cliche, but it is fundamental, right? Like, because content creation takes a level of diligence and consistency and connection with your audience. A good content creator connects with their audience. They don't simply put out consumable information that doesn't build an audience and a connection. You need to be passionate about what you're talking about. You need to bring something unique to the table, and you need to build a human connection. I don't think it's possible to really have a sustaining content creation business without those elements. So, I think connection is the most underrated aspect of content creation. It's not just putting information out into the ether, it's connecting with the audience.
So I know I have a baby face. I'm 26 years old, but I started following the Ballers. This would have had to be back in 2015, 2016. So I know you guys were probably
like the beginning.
Yeah, and I was in high school, so that's showing my age. Well, I think it's showing your age a little bit too.
Yeah, it's showing my age. Yeah,
but kind of going back to that, like, how have you seen the fantasy football space, specifically in the content creation space, change since 2014?
Well, it's certainly more saturated. I mean, there's accessibility has changed tremendously over the course of we've done it 9 years. This will be our 10th season, and the barriers to entry are very small. And so, it's like the cliche of everybody has a podcast, right? So, I mean, it's not a hard thing to turn a microphone on. There's no cost barrier. You got cameras in your computers and your phones, and it's instant, So I've seen a saturation, certainly, in the fantasy football space. But again, I think there's still a desire to build community. And I don't know if there's a lot of that out there right now. It takes a lot more than just recording a video to build a community. So I've seen the space evolve in terms of, there's a lot more niche type of analysis, which I think is fun and unique. We've had partnerships with a good friend of the show, Matt Harmon, and Reception Perception. There's a new a great site out called Coach Speak Index, where they're bringing out database analytics on coaching. Like, I think, as more and more people flood into the space, you will have those outliers that bring something really unique to the table and can find an audience, because football is so large in one specific thing. And so that's been fun to watch as well. And, the evolution of social media has changed tremendously since our early days. So I think you're going to find creators that are finding their communities in specific platform niches versus, everywhere all at once. So we've seen some people do that. It's fun to watch the space evolve. But again, I think everything comes down to connection. That's also, it's definitely what we've built our brand on.
No, 100%. And it's an impressive brand. So kind of going back, so we're sticking back into the early days. What would you have changed, kind of knowing what you know now, knowing how you've grown? Is there something that, some footfalls that you might have had to overcome that you now know, hey, don't do this, or like kind of how would you have changed what you have done building up to now?
It's a good question, and we get it a lot, and I feel almost guilty not having a great answer for it, because I feel like there weren't any like gigantic pitfalls like you mentioned, or holes we stepped in the early days. I do think that like there's a fundamental difference between perceived success and success. And there's a lot of environment, I heard something the other day that podcasts are consumed at a higher rate for 18 to 34-year-olds than television now. And so there's been a transformation in media, and there's what the world perceives as success in media. And then there's like secret success in media. When we were doing podcasts for the first 4 or 5 years, people are like, what? Like, and you pay your bills and you have a family that can live off of this. And then you have employees. Like, they didn't comprehend that, because the perception in the public of success was Sirius XM or television or radio. And those were kind of more dying mediums. So I guess I would tell content creators not to be caught up in trying to appear successful, and understand their underlying why and the metrics that they track as success. And so more markets, more platforms are going to emerge, and people are going to succeed on them, and it won't be recognized as success for a really long time. And so I think some of our most valuable decisions that we made on the show were saying no to things, and saying no, not yet to things, because of timing, because of, everyone gets 24 hours in the day, and you can only commit so much to a focused effort. And I think that that's an underrated aspect, is people think they need to do everything. They don't. They need to do a few things really well, and then love doing them.
So I'm a big, of course, been following you forever. Nick over at BDG, he always says not to monetize your audience for the first, 2 to 3 years. Make all the content you can. A lot of people don't like to hear that, because they like to see some type of monetary gain, because, subscribers, followers, listeners, that's not enough. So looking back, you guys have amazing products, amazing memberships at the UDK every year. Absolutely amazing product. So my question is, how did you guys kind of figure out what your audience was looking for in a way that could also then start to sustain the business that you were building?
We were not, when we started this company, one, there wasn't a template for the podcasting emerging space. So, we weren't sitting there reading articles about how to build an audience. We weren't watching YouTube breakdowns or shorts about how to monetize an audience. We were 3 young dads that had transitioned out of another career, that wanted to do something that we loved. And once we had an inkling that it could be successful, we put everything into it and literally tried to buy months of survival for the first year. So we were very much chasing some form of monetization to prove the model, to prove that we could do something and it could be year round. So that meant creating products that we only carried for 1 year, because it was a way to buy a future month. It meant doing ad deals that were prepaid at a bad rate, because it bought us another month. So for us, the way we went about it was very different. I think not everybody has the identical circumstances when creating a business to have the luxury of building an audience and not monetizing it for a long period of time. Some people can't do that. So I think it varies. I think the advice as a whole is good. Nick is a great friend of the show. Absolutely love the guy. Really smart, kind human being. So people don't know that about him. Maybe he doesn't want him to know that, but he's a good dude, really good dude. And I think it is good advice at a whole, because if you have an audience, you can monetize it. You don't have to worry about it along the way. Like if you have a group of people dedicated to your brand that care about it, that are passionate about it, you can figure the rest out. So I think that advice is very good as a whole, but at the same time, not every circumstance is the same. Sometimes you need to be able to put yourself in full time, and you can't do that if you have another 9 to 5. So you do need to manufacture your way there. But I think as a whole, that makes sense. And, it's just going to vary case by case.
So if you follow Andy on Twitter, you've seen him post, like he posts a lot about fantasy NFL football, but he's also been posting a lot more about pickleball. So tell us about your love for pickleball, how you got started, and also kind of how you are integrated. I know you keep posting a paddle. I've checked it out. I definitely need to buy it. It was sold out the last time I checked, and I'll have that link down below as well. So kind of want to hear how that kind of all started.
Well, pickleball was the old man graduation from flag football. Many of the guys here at the studio and the company, we played probably about 7-8 years worth of flag football, 3 seasons a year. It was a camaraderie thing. It was some of the most fun we ever had, going out 8-on-8 flag football, going from the worst team in the league, winning a championship, but having, broken toes and torn ACLs along the way for everybody on the team. So we all kind of got too old for that. I'm going to be honest with you. And so we got introduced to pickleball before it even started its massive ascension to being what it is today. We're all hyper competitive, whether it's foosball or ping pong or pickleball or, whatever. So whatever we do in the studio, we are hyper competitive. Pickleball was this accessible way for us to connect, stay healthy, be hyper competitive. And so it became a passion. We have a fantasy footballers pickleball arena. So we actually have an indoor pickleball facility just about a quarter mile from our main studio that we get to go and play. We play in tournaments, and we play and just enjoy the competitiveness of it. And I have, like, my dad's 70 years old and still plays pickleball. So this is something I know I can do for about 30 more years at least. And, in terms of the brand, our producer, Jeremy, and then Jason, they started a company called Ballr Pickleball, which was literally built around a couple of fundamental things, which was creating high quality, like they kind of like would break paddles sometimes when they were angry, and they're like, this is too expensive to like buy a new one every time. So they figured out how to manufacture a super high quality paddle at a lower price, and then they committed to donating 50+% of the profits to a variety of local charities. And so it is very much a muse for us. I'm involved in it now, and it's just there to be a trustworthy brand in the space, to buy a high quality pickleball paddle and to do some good in the local community. So it's a passion project, you could say. So yeah, we love it. It's an outlet. We're all doing the fantasy football thing all the time. So when we get to do something else, it's fun.
And my final question is, who is the best pickleball player in the office?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want to toot my own horn, but it is me.
Good, good
look, there's nothing else to say. If they want to challenge for that title, that's fine. No, we're all very competitive. I'll pretend that I am definitely the best, but everybody has a good time, and our matches are heated. It's good.
Well, I know Nick's been posting the ping pong tournaments over at the BDG office, so we might.
Yeah, dude, I'll take them on. That's fine. Yeah,
we might need a fantasy footballer stream of a pickleball tournament for an hour to see.
That'd be pretty fun.
Get it on stream. So, like I said, Andy, appreciate you so much for coming on to the channel. All of his stuff's linked down below, as well as the pickleball paddle. Appreciate you, Andy, so much for coming on. It means the absolute world. Hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.